Good morning, everyone. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to our IBM and CM First webinar with IBM Guardium, IBM Guardium Analyzer. My name is Mark Weiss. I will be your host today. For our friends on the West Coast, I would like to thank all of you for starting your day early with us, and for our friends across the pond in Europe, thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. We have an incredible array of talent on this conference, and we will be getting to that shortly. But before we do so, what we're going to do, as we wait for just a few more individuals to join, is we're going to start you with a polling question. Now, throughout this presentation, we're going to be asking you some polling questions where you'll have a chance to share with us your perspective of what's occurring in your organization. But in the same way that as you listen through the presentations, you'll have a chance to type in your questions that we will get to as we come to the conclusion of the event. So don't hesitate to type in your questions, okay? Let's start with the first polling question. And this is about the data privacy mandates that affect your organization. So the first question is, data privacy mandates affect my company, and you have four choices. Please click on the choice that most represents your organization. We are still collecting responses, but I will share with you that the results are not a surprise and are what is expected. 82% of you voted. 57% said to a great degree. 30% or 29% actually said to a moderate degree. Effectively, 86% of you on this call are affected by data privacy mandates. I think this call will resonate quite strongly with you, and we would ask you to share this back with your organization. And if you hear what you like, to work with us, because we understand these issues. This is why we are conducting this call, to help you and your organizations throughout the remainder of 2018 and certainly into the future. Let's move on to the next call. Next slide. So let's talk about CM First, which we will move to as soon as the slides progress. Let's keep these pictures up, because these are great. These are great Photoshop pictures. We have some incredible talent on the call. You've heard the old line of, we searched far and wide to find the absolute best speakers in the world. Well, actually, this time we actually found the best speakers in the world. Unfortunately, they weren't available either, but we do have Dave and Leslie to join us. Look, I joke, but we are thrilled, and when I share with you their bios, and I'll do this, I'll do Dave's bio in a second. It's incredible that we are thrilled in many ways to be able to have Leslie and Dave share with us, especially this late in December when organizations are working to close last quarter business and do all the projects before year end, to spend time with us. Let's go to the next slide. So today's format will be, again, the introductions. Dave is going to talk about problems with data security. Why do you care? And I think the polls explain to all of us why we care, right? We're all affected by these mandates. We're going to talk about data analysis solutions. You're going to hear about the IBM Guardium strategy in the domain, and something new that you may not have heard of called IBM Guardium Analyzer, which you're going to want to hear about, and you're going to be considering as your organizations move forward. And then, as I mentioned, you have a chance throughout this presentation to enter your questions in. and we will do a summary and Q&A at the very, very end. Okay, next slide. Let's talk about CM First. CM First, and we are the host of this webinar, is a partner with, well, let's put it this way. We are an enterprise partner. We work with some of the largest enterprise vendors in the world. We are a partner with IBM. We are a partner with Broadcom. We are a partner because, let's be candid, in this world that we live on, your organization is probably working with multiple vendors. So we understand that. We can work with you. We can help you. We understand the enterprise space. We have worked with over 400 enterprises, and of course that number continues to grow as we continue to grow. So candidly, our mission is very simple. Provide the most reliable, rapid, and cost-effective software tools to optimize and transform enterprise applications. That's what your organization's about, and that's what our organization's about. As we go to the next slide, you'll see some very common names on the bottom, just some household names that we have worked with and have guided. So let's talk about our first speaker, Dave Voloshin. I've known Dave for a number of years, and he still decided to work with us, which I'm very, very thrilled with. Dave is the worldwide IBM Data Security segment leader, and Dave is responsible for the entire Guardium data portfolio. A lot of you may know Dave. You may have seen him in speaking engagements. He's got 30 years of direct channel international experience. But what I find to be most telling is Dave has been guiding both European and global, so worldwide organizations, to prepare them for GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulations, again, which many of your organizations are working with today. So we are absolutely thrilled to work with and to have Mr. Dave Voloshin on our call. Dave, let me turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Mark. Pleasure to be here, and thanks very much for inviting me. And I'd like to just kind of start off with the great work I think we've been doing together with CM First, and I'd like to share some of those examples here as we kind of go down the path of what I call a smarter way to tackle data security. So as Mark said, I've been doing this for many, many years, and I would say that some things have changed and some things remain the same. And I think we as a team have always had the ability to take a look at different technologies and try to help to make our lives easier. But really the purpose hasn't changed. So the technologies may have changed over time, but really the goal of trying to put together the best combination of technologies at the lowest cost to try to secure our data is an important directive. And we've been doing that for many, many years, but now even more so with these regulations that have been changing. And I think we know from Europe, of course, GDPR is an important thing, but that's having a ripple effect across the US environment as well. And we're seeing laws pop up not only in California, in New York, there are even certain municipalities like in Chicago where data is becoming so important to take a look at and find out where it is and how you protect it, that you really do need a smarter way to do this. This is not something that's getting, I would say, worse over time because there's more data, there's more hackers out there. Everybody knows about the Marriott breach and some of the other things that have happened recently. So getting around this challenge is really something that's very, very important. And over time, the landscape has changed. So let's jump to the next slide and take a look at what's happened over the years. We can see that in 2011, things started to, we're kind of there, but 2012 really things started to hit the marketplace, and you'll see that there was a lot of yellow there, which we saw as SQL injection. So SQL, structured query language, meaning the language that databases use to communicate with applications, was the ability, the attack vector that people mostly used in attacking this data, trying to get to the data. But if you go forward through 2015 through 2016, you'll start to see the purple taking over. And purple is really misconfigurations. So these are the exploits that we see where someone can do something fairly simple, which is take advantage of exposures that are in the operating systems or in the databases themselves and get to the data not through a sophisticated SQL injection attack, but really through a simplistic misconfiguration. So as we've seen this change over time, I think we need to really be aware of this as we start to put together things that are going to help us find things that will highlight misconfigurations, things that will highlight where the data is, and put together a program around how we can actually get ahead of this and not only protect the data, but protect our jobs. Next slide. And the data is what people are after. So, but the data, to get to it, you need to also understand how people are getting to it and who is getting to it. So sometimes I ask clients, which we talk about how we were doing planning, and I'll say, you have this big Oracle database, has lots of sensitive data in it, but is that a risk to the organization? And they say, oh, yes, it is. And I say, well, maybe not. Let's take a look and see how that database is configured. Is that secure? Are there any attack vectors, any default ports that are open, or any IDs, passwords that are not there? So the state of that data container, as well as the data, will then start to indicate the risk. And then I'll say, how is that being addressed? And are people accessing this through their application layer or direct access? So the how is important, which is the application layer. And then, of course, it's the who. And the who is not just, is it somebody who is internal, but what we're finding is a lot of these credentials are being compromised. So the compromised credentials, which are kind of people are doing spear phishing or phishing attacks, trying to get through social engineering access to accounts, and then they actually look like somebody who's internal because they've compromised, let's say, a DBA's credential, and they're starting to touch that data in different ways. So one of it is figuring out how to determine who is accessing what, how, but then to then look at this in terms of the risk profile and layer on top of that the compliance initiatives that you may be facing today. Next slide. So really, the goal is to really prove that privileged users haven't accessed or jeopardized your sensitive data. And that's kind of a charged statement. Prove meaning not using native logging, something that can be altered, but doing something that has a forensics quality data audit trail. And privileged users, meaning that you've now gone out to your LDAP or Active Directory or on Z, if maybe it's RACF or ACF2. You take a look at some of the technologies out there, System Series I and Z. They are some of the most secure technologies available. That's really one of the benefits of people that are using that technology. But when you have a privileged user on that technology, they can bypass many controls and have access to all the data that they can see. So understanding who those privileged users are and are they accessing it, and then understanding where your sensitive data is by doing data discovery and classification. So this kind of is something that we've used as a goal for the data security portfolio here at IBM. So we'll talk a little bit about this, and I'll give you some examples of how customers are approaching this in a very logical way. Next slide. And the challenge is, of course, to do that, you need to understand your landscape, which is what type of databases do you have, but also what applications are touching those databases, data warehouses, or now as people are starting to move into the cloud. So big data environments, AWS, Amazon, Azure, IBM Cloud. So all this data is moving around, and so to understand where it's going and where it's coming from, as well as who's seeing it, is very, very important. And you can take a look at these independently and have a unique solution for each one of these, or you can look at something that might be able to pull together a lot of these together, including Z and I, to have one control to kind of manage this all. And this is where we start to see technologies that do cover a broad range of data sources being probably the better technologies for you to save time and money, because you can have one policy that's applied based on what's happening underneath. And so those different dialects that the databases speak. So IBM Z, DB2 on Z, slightly different than DB2 on distributed, slightly different than System Series I. So all of those dialects need to be understood by technology, and that's what we'll explore a little in the next few minutes here. Next slide. How do you begin this journey? And so what I've seen is organizations don't know where their sensitive data is. So the first logical step is really to do discovery and classification. And that's going to take a look at what type of patterns of this data. So part of it is looking at the metadata, schemas, of course, and looking at the columns and seeing what things are identified. But many times those organizations with applications that are off the shelf or even custom applications, the schema doesn't tell you too much. You need to really go into the data itself, sample it, and then compare it to other things. And the comparison might be with a data dictionary. Is this part of a group of things that I know that seem similar, and therefore I can classify this as an email address, or maybe it's as a top last name. So last names or addresses. Let's say if I'm doing a privacy project in Switzerland, we know the top Swiss last names, and we can check to see if those are in the columns, and that will tell me that that column is identified as a last name. So or regular expressions, combinations of characters and mod checks and different things that will tell us, is this data really sensitive? So first, where that data is. Many organizations will go to encryption, and I encourage you to take a look at encryption if you are part of the GDPR regulatory compliance mandates. Encryption allows you to bypass, or really to not have to do some of the 72-hour notifications. So encryption is an important piece of it. We're not going to really talk about that today, but it's really putting that first layer of security around the data and then taking a look at the repository itself. So vulnerabilities, how secure is the repository, is that container, as I said before, to make sure that there's no misconfigurations that would be able to be exploited. So that's kind of looking at database, data at rest, the configuration, and then of course that who, the entitlements, who's accessing this and what they're doing. So today we're going to focus on these first few elements, the data discovery, classification, and the assessment piece. But just to know that those are really the first steps on the journey, and the portfolio that IBM has and that CM First can help you evaluate will continue on through the activity monitoring, which is what's actually happening. So the data in movement, where's it going to, who's accessing it, how they're accessing it, and then ultimately putting in some preventative controls like blocking or quarantining or using some of the masking or tokenization used for GDPR. So this kind of process has a logical path of that discover, harden, and then monitoring and protecting. So it gives you kind of a framework that you can use and talk to your teams about this and involve different parts of the organization to see how the data is being used and really what's needed to protect it. Next slide. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to Leslie Wiggins, who is our product manager. She's been working on many of these elements that I've discussed. Just to kind of talk about this, the analysis as a service, this is a service offering that can be used to help on the discovery, classification, and the assessment. And Leslie's going to go into it a little more deeper and highlight some of the things that I've talked about here in the overview. So Leslie, over to you.
Well, actually, Dave, I get the pleasure of introducing Leslie, which is great. Leslie, you weren't gonna get off the hook that easy. I think we do have a question. I think I've heard there's a question. But take a look and see if I can see it. Here's the question: which security certification is best for managing data security, or is there any particular security cert that is best for managing data security?
Well, I think it depends on the organization. So I've seen some smaller organizations use some of the general security frameworks that are out there. Some people actually like NIST, which is the government one. There's a lot of documentation on that. Many of the U.S. organizations are using GDPR, even though it's a European regulation. It has a framework that allows them to use that as the primary control, and meaning that they don't have to worry about doing. It's sort of a superset. It doesn't require necessarily some of the elements in the U.S., but it does give you a good path to get down that. I've seen other people as well, PCI, payment card industry, which is typically used for people that are processing credit card transactions. That's a little narrower, and it's effectively looking at just payment card industry, so it's not as pervasive, as you say. And then there's some of the ISO standards as well. So I think it depends on the size of the organization. It depends on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish and where you do business. But I would say right now I'm seeing mostly between NIST and GDPR kind of being the two top ones that I see.
Thank Thank you very much, Dave.
And also, just as an aside, I also think that when you take a look at the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, the two major ones that I see are STIG, which is the Software Technology Information Group. It's the way to configure and use that as a framework, and CIS, which is the CIS benchmarks. Those two provide, I think, great guidance on that. There's a lot of documentation around that, and again, if you follow some of those, then you'll be very secure around your data sources.
Real quick, Dave, and then we'll get to Leslie. I mean, you saw from the first polling question, almost 80% of the people listening on this call are impacted. I mean, from your experience, I mean, this is what you live and breathe every day. I mean, are you just seeing those numbers just, I mean, are you seeing panic yet, or are you just starting to see a much stronger focus, or both?
Well, I see kind of customers falling into three categories, and we have kind of the more closer to financial services, where people have been under regulatory review for many, many years. So they kind of got ahead of this and really of doing that. So I would call them kind of the rabbit, the sort of like the hare. They're going fast. They're going to do it. Then I see the second category, which is the turtle, and they're a little slower. They're going to wait. They don't want to think about fines because they're never going to be fined because they're in some low-level industry with very few employees, et cetera, et cetera. So they're kind of somewhat slow, but they're moving and they're trying to understand the impact financially and organizationally. And then the third, I think, is really kind of what I call the ostrich, and they're sticking their head in the sand and saying, "Yep, I just don't want to see it. I don't want to deal with it," and they're probably in the most trouble because they're gonna, with their head in the sand, they're gonna get run over by a truck because this is something's gonna be deep. So I would say, people kind of fall into those categories and they can move among them, but people that get ahead of it actually, and one of the items that I saw from Gartner actually, and actually Forrester, which was that this can be a life-changing experience for your organization. So if you don't embrace it, it becomes a burden, and it's really difficult, and you're complaining, and it's lots of work and all that. But it can be a formative experience if you look at GDPR and say, we want to change the way that we do business by taking privacy as a competitive differentiator and telling our customers we're very concerned about their data, and making this a transformational element for the employees at the company. You can use this as a catalyst and really as a motivator, and people will get behind this much faster. So kind of the good news, bad news. You can look at it negatively, but if organizations that are looking at this positively really transform their business, get ahead of this, and then will ultimately save time and money because they look at things in a different light.
Dave, thank you. Spot on, and it's very obvious why you are the worldwide lead in this, and why you are helping organizations not only across the pond and our friends in Europe with GDPR, but why you're also heavily involved in helping our organizations here in the States quickly protect security. All of us have been receiving the emails that either say your credit card has potentially been compromised, or the emails that say we are changing our data security protocols. We get those every day. So the world is changing, and I'm very much appreciative that together we can be on top of this.
Well, actually, just to kind of add another sort of anecdote here, because of GDPR in Europe, the European citizens own their data. So if they ask for their data back, which is their name, their address, their email, companies have to give it back to them. Whereas in the States here, we don't own our data as citizens of the U.S. Our data is used, but it's really owned by the organizations. So American Express or the large banks own the data that they can then use and sell and monetize. So it's a very different model. And we're seeing a lot of movement right now in California and in New York, where they're considering allowing citizens to own their data and ask for their data back. So that's changing the landscape dramatically. And I think over the next few years, we're going to see this really groundswell changing how people look at data and why data is important. Data is valuable, and data is valuable as to us as people and to organizations.
Well, Dave, to your point, if a customer in the United States goes to an organization and says, please remove any of my data, they are now accountable and responsible for doing that, correct?
Well, not really, no, because you can try it. go to American Express and say, I want you to remove all my data, and see what they say, because they're not going to. But if it was in Europe, they would have to do it. So if it's a European citizen, doing business in the U.S. So if it was a European citizen, and this is sort of the gray area. We can do a whole nother session on this, but gray area, who owns that data and who's responsible and who's the custodian and who's the data owner, really falls into a lot of gray area in some of these regulations.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate your insight. It is a pleasure to introduce to Leslie. When we were putting this event together, I jokingly say we look for the best person in the world, and we were describing what we needed, and the question came, Mark, if we could find someone that worked in product management and product marketing, worked in a analytics business unit, and let's say is the senior product manager for IBM's data security portfolio, and actually is responsible for IBM's security Guardium Analyzer, would you be interested? And I said, oh my God, you're talking Leslie, aren't you? And they said yes. So Leslie, we are absolutely thrilled, delighted to have you as part of our call. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me turn it over to you.
Sounds good, and thank you so much for having me, and Dave as well. So Dave spoke a lot about, he spoke a lot about a lot of things, but he majored for a few moments there on discovery and classification and finding the what, the data, and the importance of understanding the misconfigurations or the vulnerabilities that are found within data sources. And that's what we're going to get a little further into as we go on with this next section of the conversation. But before I get there, I'm going to tie back to what Dave was talking about, at a bigger level, whether you're looking at a data privacy mandate, multiple data privacy mandates, or just GDPR, or you're looking more broadly at data security, it doesn't matter. Data is still your most critical asset, and it's difficult. It's a difficult topic to tackle. The average cost of a data breach is large. The size of the data breaches that we're seeing lately is ever growing, and there's just so much data to handle. So part of my mission with Guardium Analyzer is to make it a little bit easier, hopefully a lot bit easier, to figure out where to get started and how to grow your projects from there. Also the fact that data privacy mandates are exploding. I mean, we saw the survey results at the beginning of the presentation. Nearly all of you are impacted by data privacy mandates, whether they be PCI or HIPAA or the New York regulation, the California regulation, GDPR, or the Brazil is following, quick fast follow in GDPR's footsteps, and I think we'll see just more and more of these regulations coming up. So having a way to get a handle on the somewhat hairy situation is so important to having confidence in moving forward with data privacy and compliance issues. So I'm just waiting for the screen to refresh. So what I wanted to spend some time talking to you about is Guardium Analyzer. So I'm going to discuss a few slides to set the stage, and then if all the stars are in alignment, I'm actually going to do a little demo, a little tour of Guardium Analyzer, which is our first data security-oriented software as a services offering. So the mission, the reason for being for Guardium Analyzer is to help you find the what, the data, but not just do that data discovery and classification, but also have a way to assign and understand the risk that's associated not just with that regulated data, whether it's personal data or sensitive personal data, or in GDPR terms, you could think of it conceptually as PII and special category data. But not just finding that, but also understanding the risk associated with those data sources that data is sitting in, each data source, so that you know what the overall risk is and you understand how to move forward, whether it's with data privacy mandates or whether it's with broader data security efforts, how to get started and where to get started in a very tactical and specific way to do things like go forward and apply some of the data protection techniques that Dave was mentioning, whether it be encryption or data activity monitoring, so that you can identify when user IDs get compromised for privileged users, for example. So But to go back to Analyzer, so our mission in life is to efficiently identify compliance and security risk associated with regulated data. We do that by finding that data. We have a next generation classification engine as part of the Guardium Analyzer service, as well as pre-built data patterns that help you to find and classify that regulated data. In tandem with finding that data, we also do vulnerability assessment scans on the data repositories that that data is sitting in. And in the background, there is a proprietary risk scoring algorithm that then presents back to the user, and I'll show you this in just a second, but it presents back to the user a prioritized list of data sources that may be at risk of failing a regulatory audit. So priority 1 are the most at risk databases or data sources, priority 2 are medium risk, and priority 3 are lower risk. And as you drill into the Guardium Analyzer dashboard, you're able to see the specific details about those vulnerabilities and get specific remediation steps that will then help the DBAs, for example, go on and fix those vulnerabilities so that the next time a Guardium Analyzer scan runs, you will have a reduced risk profile. So, waiting for loading, hold on. Okay, you should see it now. So just a screenshot that I wanted to preview with you before we get into the demo. So the way you get to this, so I mentioned that Guardium Analyzer is a software as a service offering. So there are 2 components to Guardium Analyzer. The first component is a data connector. That data connector sits locally near the data sources or databases that you're interested in scanning and understanding the risk about. And then there's also a cloud-based dashboard, which is what we're looking at. So the data connector stays local. It scans the data sources. It finds the data to classify. It finds the vulnerabilities. The data in the data connector, while it's scanning, is encrypted. Once the scan is complete, the data is deleted, it's removed, and the metadata or insights about that data is what's shared with the dashboard. So we are not moving or storing or otherwise messing around with sensitive personal data directly. It's staying local in your environment. We're just reflecting the insights about what we found in the cloud. So that's very important for data privacy mandates. So what you see here, I consider my go-to tile the database is at risk whenever I log into Guardium Analyzer. So this is your snapshot of the risk in your business. Again, I mentioned priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. Priority 1 are the most at-risk databases. Priority 3 are the lowest. Then you see data patterns found. So these are from the out-of-the-box data patterns that we provide. You're also able to, with our professional plan for Guardium Analyzer, add custom data patterns as well. From there, you can move over to the third tile on the right, if you will, which are vulnerability tests that may have been failed, and we break those down in critical, high, and medium importance. And then you also see databases scanned. Below, and I'll do the click-through demo in just a second, but below you'll also see database locations. The map is accurate at a geographic level, at a regional level rather, but if you click each one of these little dots, as I'll show you in a second, it will take you down to the specific country level. And then you also see failed test types as well as top vulnerabilities. So Guardium Analyzer actually started its life out as being focused on GDPR. We had so much demand straight out of the gate for the ability to support other regulations that we rapidly started building out support for other regulations. So this isn't a full example of things we support, just something to give you a sense of, examples of the out-of-the-box patterns we have for GDPR, patterns that can be applied for PCI, other patterns that may be applied for HIPAA, and we could keep going on, the Brazilian Data Privacy Act or the California Data Privacy Act, and just keep going there. But I just wanted to share a little sampling. Let me do a quick time check. I'm going to try to flip over and do the demo. So I think you're going to see a blank screen for a second, maybe. And I'm going to try to change applications. Aha. Dave, if you're still there, could you let me know if you see the logon page?
I do see it. It looks beautiful.
It's working. I love it when webinars work. So this is the logon screen for Guardium Analyzer. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the target users for Guardium Analyzer are compliance managers together with their DBAs. So our point of view is that this is a team effort to support data privacy and also data security initiatives more broadly, and that we need a way to help the compliance managers communicate better with the DBAs and vice versa. And so this service is meant to be used by both types of folks together. All right, so this is the logon screen. I am going to go ahead. I already primed the pump here. I'm going to click login. Oh, and my session expired. Of course it did, because I tried to be too prepared. So bear with me. I'm going to just do that again. And also, while I'm logging in, there is a free trial that is available for, oh goody, of course not. There is a free trial that is available for Guardium Analyzer for anybody that wants to play around and experience it firsthand. And this is promising.
Leslie, it was not lost on me as this screen loads that it is so delightful to see someone who's responsible for the data security portfolio also getting a message every so often, wrong password.
Means it's working, right?
Listen, we appreciate the fact that this is not a canned demo and that you're using real life code.
And look, I'm in, so it's beautiful. Also, before I start doing the live tour, I do just want to mention one more thing. So as I mentioned, Guardium Analyzer is first focused on data privacy and regulatory mandates, but we've seen some very positive behavior from some of our other clients as well. For example, we have one client that has been undertaking a data security journey with us, and a few weeks ago they determined that they had, and I'm not joking, they had 500 databases that they did not know they had. And so they came to us to start discussions around Guardium Analyzer, which is a new service. So they wanted to learn some more information about it, but to use Guardium Analyzer as a way to get a lens, a view into those 500 databases that they just discovered, so that they can decide how they want to prioritize the phases of applying those data security protections that Dave mentioned to all of those databases, so that they have a focused and targeted approach to move forward with based on the risk in the environment. So we're seeing all sorts of applications, that way with Guardium Analyzer and the ability to identify risk. So here we are with that first tile, the databases at risk tile. So you can see as I scroll over, I don't have, and this is our little test demo environment. So happily, we don't have any priority 1 databases at risk. Priority 2, you've got 7 of 13, and then priority 3, even fewer. So if I click view all, I'm taken down to another level, and I'm able to see, the priority, and I can filter. So in a heartbeat, I'm able to filter and view just the things that I want to view. I'm going to go back to priority 2, though. All right, so here I can see the priority. I can see the name of each database. I can see the patterns associated with the database, as well as the vulnerabilities associated. And here is the specific location details. And you tell the data connector, which is what was doing the scanning, if you remember, you tell the data connector where the databases are as part of that setup process, which is where it gets this information. You can also see the DBA name, and the last column over is when the database was last scanned. You can set Guardium Analyzer up to scan on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis based on what your business needs are. All right, so if I pick one of these databases, I can take a step deeper, and I can go in and see what the vulnerabilities are that are associated with that database. So if I'm a compliance manager and I'm concerned, I can come on in here and see what the vulnerabilities are. I can click through and, hold on, I have to move the webcast box. So I can click through. I hope the webcast box isn't impeding anybody else's view, and it's just me.
No,
so if I click through,
you're good.
Okay, good. So if I click through, I can see more details about each vulnerability that I want to drill into. You can see the finding. You can see the description of the test that was run to create the finding or to lead to the finding. You see a fix recommendation, and you can also see a history here, or you would see a history here. Right now we have 1 dot based on when this environment was set up. So you see a red dot, it means there was an issue. In subsequent scans, if it's been fixed, you would see blue dots, like a breadcrumb trail, or if the issue pops back up, you would get another red dot. So you can see kind of like a timeline of what's happened around this vulnerability. You also have the ability to, again, so if I'm pretending I'm the compliance manager here, I can click this share button at the top, and when you set up the Guardium Analyzer service, you would include the DBAs that are responsible for the databases that you're scanning. And so as part of that, I'm able to then, if I were to click on this little tabby here, I would be able to share this vulnerability with the DBA owner of the database and ask him or her to go ahead and start, fixing or addressing that vulnerability. If that person does fix that vulnerability, they would click this Mark as Fixed button, which of course is not working in my little demo environment today, but there's a box and it's blue, and they would click it. And if the DBA clicks Mark as Fixed by accident, or the vulnerability is not finished being addressed, in the next scan, Guardium Analyzer will pick up that vulnerability again and bring it to the surface so that it is not overlooked, and that that misconfiguration issue doesn't lie, lurking beneath the surface. Okay, so if I go back to my Insights dashboard, I'm going to drill next into the data classification tile. Or not, hold on, there we go. So if I want to get more information about, for example, sensitive personal patterns, so for GDPR, but also for the other data privacy mandates, some types of data is considered to be more private or personal than other types of data. Name and address are personal, but information about religion or sexual orientation or gender is considered to be, even more important to manage and govern responsibly. So if I were to click here and drill down, I would be able to get to the schema table column level for where sexual orientation information may be found. And that helps in terms of next steps when you decide, based on the goals of your business and the outcomes you want to achieve, whether you want to apply encryption or data activity monitoring here, how you're going to protect those particular tables and areas of the database. And same click through notion applies here. Hold on, I'm just trying to move the webinar box so I can see too. Okay, so you can get more information here. You find what the matching rate was. If you believe something is showing up as a false positive, you're able to select false positive. You see this was successfully marked as false positive. And then the next time Guardium Analyzer scans, your risk, your overall risk will be lessened by a fraction, depending on how many false positives you find, because that particular piece of data no longer presents a risk to the business. And I'm going to just remove that one and back up. Okay. Next, I'm going to go into settings because I did mention that you are able to customize the data pattern. So Guardium Analyzer's next generation data classification engine uses AQL. And as part of doing that, we can go beyond metadata classification, metadata-based classification, and regular expression-based classification and get to having more robust data patterns, but also we apply a algorithm to make sure the matching results that are found are actually correct. It's a checksum algorithm, and it makes sure things like, the Polish national ID number is actually the Polish national ID number. It is not the German pension number or the French insurance number or some other pattern. So it's a way to validate the results returned and increase the robustness or the reliability of data classification. So that's what's built in. When folks go ahead and add patterns themselves, we don't have the ability yet to have people add AQL custom patterns, but we do have the ability for, and I'm just moving the WebEx screens again, bear with me, almost there. So we do have the ability to have you add custom patterns. And when you do that, it's just as simple as what I'm going to talk through. So data pattern 3, we're going to call this one, or nope, 3. This is test pattern 3. And then you pick whether the new pattern you're adding counts as personal or sensitive personal data. We're going to pick personal. You click continue. You can add this either as a regular expression or a keyword, or you can think of that as a dictionary term for lookup. And then test pattern 3. And once you've completed all of that information, you just click save. And in a moment, you will see, here it is, data pattern 3 shows up. It's a custom pattern. You can see what type of rule it is based on. And then again, the next time Guardium Analyzer goes through its scanning process, that pattern will be included as part of the scanning and as part of the risk results. So, and then if I were to, just did want to show you the map for a moment. If I were to hover over the map, you can see at a glance where geographically those databases are. If I click on a dot in a region, I will get to the detail of where within that region those databases were. Okay, so really with that, I am going to leave just a few minutes for questions, and we'll leave it there. And if anybody does have any questions after the fact, we are, of course, here. I'm happy to do, custom demos for anybody that needs them with John or Mark. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Leslie. While we wait for the questions to be typed in, as you have been going through the development cycle, what have you been hearing from your customer set or from industry customers as to why we need this functionality? I mean, what drove the development of this technology? I mean, I think we all know the answer, but you've been involved in the planning of this, so I'd appreciate your perspective.
Yes, no, it's really about giving people a lens through which to view their environments and find a reasonable way to go ahead and get started prioritizing the next steps, whether that be for data privacy, which there's a specific and burning need for, or whether it's to help people bridge from data privacy steps into broader data security efforts. I missed mentioning 2 key pieces of information that I meant to tackle. I meant to mention these little dashes from the dashboard here will show your trending over time. So ultimately, the more you scan, the more information these little trend lines will give you. So hopefully over time, your database is at risk. The risk will be declining, and you'll see that in your little arrow here. Data patterns over time will probably be growing. If your business is thriving and growing, chances are you're adding new customers or adding new employees or adding new suppliers. So that would be expected to grow. And hopefully your tests failed over time will be declining, but we give you a way to see that and visualize that as part of the dashboard. And then the other key piece of information I missed out on is which data sources we support. So you might have gathered, We are focused on structured data. We support DB2, Oracle, SQL Server, and MySQL, and our engineering team is working their hearts out to support DB2 for I as close to the end of the year as humanly possible. So that is coming in the very immediate future. So, okay, I think I answered your question and provided the pieces of information that I forgot to cover.
Leslie, and I thank you so much for your insight. We're going to piggyback. Your presentation with the next polling question. What is the most important data source you are worried about? And we'd ask you to please choose whether it's DB2 for I, for DB2 for ZOS, the Linux or Windows platform, SQL Server, or the MongoDB and Cloud. Please take a minute to click your answers.
And Mark, while we're waiting for the polling results to come in, I just wanted to mention something as well that I'm not sure Leslie highlighted, which was the reason why I think Analyzer is becoming so prevalent right now is because of the need to not install software. So the service, as a service, meaning that you don't have to really install software except for that connector, which provides that connection piece. Other than that, there's really nothing to install. So you can get your results within 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So within the hour, you'll be able to sign up for the IBM ID. You have the free access to I think it's up to 3 data sources for your trial, so you can use that on 3 active data sources and get value right out of the gate without having to really install any software or go through change control.
Thank you, Dave. This is superb. And again, for those of you who are listening in, we're going to take you through how to get this trial and how you can get started to move on this. But let's take a look at some of the results. No surprise from knowing who our audience is here. 50% responded DB2 for I. 10 OS, 22% SQL Server. But again, knowing that our listening audience is, this is superb and what we expected. Other comments, Dave, Leslie, before we go to the next slide? Additional thoughts about the polling response?
Well, no, I think, as I said, kind of when I opened up, Z was always primarily implemented for its security. So that's one of the reasons why it was secure, was built with security. I also follows in its footsteps as a technology that was developed with security in mind. So those are very solid technologies. But without watching that data in motion, you lose a lot of visibility and you can actually be exposed. So while they are still very strongly secured platforms, putting in this type of a technology that looks for the discovery, the classification, and the vulnerabilities, and then putting in that data in motion, data protection really is critical, especially in those environments. And it's funny, I read something, I mean, of course, we're all on our apps, and we have all these apps on the iPhone, and we're doing our banking and everything, but I thought it was like 83% of those transactions in financial services goes back to a mainframe. So even though we are in this world of apps running on these devices, the underlying support is through Series I or through the Z. And so that's an important thing to remember too, is that even though those systems are there, they're being accessed by modern technologies which can expose quite a bit of vulnerabilities. So think about the context of proving and getting that visibility and control over these technologies is a very important thing to do today.
Well, thank you, Dave. And we agree. I mean, for you, the customers that we have on the phone who are current customers and have CM Evolve It, we are. I mean, if you take a look at the slide, we have shared with everyone how we integrate and we work with multiple vendors, and you can see multiple vendors listed there. CA now Broadcom, of course, IBM with Analyzer. So I'm delighted to also share with the group that we are integrating CM Evolve It into this technology. This is clearly the future, and we're absolutely moving in that direction. Next slide. Let me start getting ready to wrap this up. And I would ask people to stay on the line for a second because we're going to share with you how to get access to this demo. But I would first like to open this up for a brief moment and see if there's any final questions. Again, please hold on, because after the questions, we're going to give you the information of how to get access to the demo. And then after this presentation is over, there will be a very short survey. This is your chance to provide feedback to us of whether you want to hear more, whether you would like a follow-on discussion. So please, after the webinar is over, don't disconnect and leave the machine. Just take one more minute, if you would, to finish up. Any last questions for the speaker? If so, please type them in now. Again, while we're waiting for that, Dave and Leslie, our very, very sincere thanks to you for taking time in a busy December to chat with us. There's also an individual who's been in the background who I would like to mention, and I would like to say thank you to Junaid, who is the global lead for data security in SaaS. Junaid, we appreciate your support and your guidance as we've gone through this and built this, the entire IBM team. You've been terrific to work with. We're delighted to be a partner with you this. We're delighted to be working with you on behalf of our customers on this call to bring them Guardium Analyzer, and help them with these data security challenges.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having us.
Yep.
It looks
certainly
like
our pleasure.
It looks like we do have a question. Here's a question. After we've used Guardium Analyzer, what tools are available to secure and protect our data? Well, why don't you guys take a quick crack at that, and then I'll answer myself from a CM First perspective.
Right. So from an IBM perspective, as I said, that journey starts off with the discovery and classification. We have a whole number of technologies that are available under the data portfolio at IBM. So we have products for encryption, which would start at the media encryption, then file and directory encryption, then database encryption, tokenization. So there's a whole bunch of technologies there that would be used for the encryption piece. Then on the data protection side, we have